There we go.
Excellent.
Okay, good afternoon and good morning to Liz and of course, Cynthia and Scott, who are still on morning time. So thank you for joining us in today's episode of Urban Equity Chats. My name is Andre Darmanin from Urban Equity Consulting here in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And today's topic is the geography of place, the economic developer solution towards advancing equity. So first, one of the things we want to talk about here is understanding how economic development plays a role in how, how our communities are built, how our cities are built through the lens of equity. And, it's still kind of a new topic within economic development in the development area and in but in the planning profession, it's been there for a while. So, before I get into the guest intros and whatnot, let me just do a land acknowledgement for everyone else. So the city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. So without further ado, let me introduce the panelists here. And actually, you know what? I'm not even going to say panelists because we're having an intimate conversation today about economic development. So let me introduce Elizabeth Garcia. So she works as an economic development project manager at the city of Culver City, where she manages high-level economic development projects, managing redevelopment projects, along with creating linkages with creative media technology companies within the city and regionally. Before Los Angeles, she worked for the city of Berkeley, where she worked on a variety of economic development initiatives to support local businesses and encourage new investment. She also worked as a regional planner with the Southern California Association of Governments with me, where she worked on key projects, including developing economic projections for the regional transportation plan and regional housing needs assessment. Over the past 14 years, and my God, time has passed for you and I, Liz,
and we still look the same.
And we still look the same, right? So, but yeah, and so over her career, she's integrated regional urban policy with community development and economic development. Elizabeth is a member of the American Planning Association, where she's a founding member of the Latinos and Planning Division. Elizabeth earned her Master's of Urban Planning and Master's of Public Policy from the University of Michigan. No haters on here, please.
Go Blue.
There you go, see? And received her Bachelor's of Degrees in Sociology and Chicano Studies from UCLA. No USC people here as well either, so we'll go with that. She was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley in the city of Los Angeles, where she currently resides with her husband, who's behind her, and her two sons. Well, there he is, and her two sons. So welcome, Liz, and thanks for agreeing to do this. And now we have Aaliyah. So I've known Aaliyah for less than a year, and we kind of have the same issue, alignment when it comes to equity issues, and she's been a great supporter of the work that I do, and I support her work as well. She's an economic development professional based in Toronto. She has a Master's of Arts degree in geography with a concentration in local economic development from York University. She has a certificate of local economic development for Ryerson. Her experience includes 7 years of project management through projects for municipalities across Canada and the US. Leah currently works with Toronto Global as their economic development coordinator. And in this role, she is working with municipal, regional, and regional stakeholders, chambers of commerce and board of trade in understanding their supply chain needs and initiatives. Welcome, Aaliyah.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start the discussion here.
So Andre, just to take a step back,
Yeah.
Can the attendees talk?
No, I don't think they can. No,
Okay.
I don't think I set it up like that.
Can
So we can just do the Q&A.
Yeah, I just wanted to see in the chat. Can everybody put where they're from, just to get an idea, geography where folks are from.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone's put theirs in there, but if you want to put their information there as well, Anuja, Jordan, Michael, we can do that. Jordan, you're not from Calgary. You're from Chestermere, but yes.
Where you work,
He works in Chestermere. There's Eau Claire. All right.
Excellent.
And Cynthia's from, well, she's on the phone, or she's on her phone, but she's from
LA.
She's from LA. And Banuja, where are you from? And Michael, where are you from? See if they type it in. Oh, oh, Michael left. Oh no, sorry. Cynthia, she'll be back. She probably just had to.
Where's
back,
Michael from?
Let's see if he's from there.
There you go.
Oh,
Work in
there
LA.
you go.
Oh, excellent.
There you go. So we got another LA person there, and we'll wait for Michael. I can't remember where he's from. He put it in his chat. But anyway, as we start, okay, let's have this discussion. So this morning I came across a tweet from the governor of New York, the new governor, Kathy Hochuli. And the one thing that she put into the tweet was she wanted to put a stake in the ground and wanted to get workers back to the office. Now, we've come back from this pandemic. I mean, we're still not fully out of it yet. And yet there's still going to be these inequities that we have seen in how we're building our cities, the housing aspect, and of course the pandemic moved over to, everyone working from home. So this kind of message sends out a little bit of a mixed message to people. It's like, if a political leader is telling us this, and our companies are saying it's okay to work from home, then what is going on here, right? So, so let's first talk about, what does equity mean to the both of you? And then let's have that discussion about the geography of place and the network of place, as we move forward in this discussion. So anyone want to take a stab at leading this discussion? Liz, Aaliyah, go ahead.
I mean, I think just in response to that comment, that was made from the governor, one, in the ability to continue to be working from home, and at this time, place and time right now, it's a privilege right now, right? It's still a public health, emergency. Obviously in LA, a lot of us are still working from home, but the folks that are in the front line, the grocery workers, the health workers, teachers, they're not working from home, right? They've been in the front line and working since the beginning, right? Like a lot of them did not work from home. So it's a very, the folks that were in the office mainly that and continue to be in the office, are folks that are in companies or in places that, are able to continue to do that. So I think in light, kind of answering, what is equity, is being able to see that there are differences, right? And when I explain it, to my parents or to folks, it's like there are differences between folks, right? Why are some people, they're required to go back to work immediately, whereas other folks aren't? And folks are able to kind of put a stake on the ground, but that even within that, that's a privilege to be able to do that, because not everybody has the ability and the protections to be able to do that. They have to go to work, because not going to work means that you can't put food on your table, right? So I think all of that is important to kind of recognize that, equity means the indifferent, just making sure that folks are at par, and seeing, and just in the inequities is that obviously that you see the differences, the stark differences that we see, that we've always seen and we continue to see in our societies, in our cities.
Mhm. Aaliyah, what's your take on that tweet and and join the discussion, go ahead.
Yeah, so my thought is more so about for equity, in regards to equity, more equality, the opportunities you get. And I feel like, from the beginning, I think from birth, there's like where you're born plays a role in the opportunities you get. I don't know if everyone's familiar with this video. It's more so like a high school coach who is talking to his students and talking to them and asking them, step forward. If you went to college, step forward. If you got your high school diploma, step forward. If you have a family. And as people were stepping forward, there's only like one or two left at the end, where they had all these opportunities and experiences that these other students didn't. And that's where we're seeing that even in the workplace, or even that's what I'm talking about by birth, in terms of geography plays a huge role in that, and the quality or the equity, or how your country or the city addresses those issues. And so looking at New York's, governor addressing that, in terms of remote work, it's a privilege for a few organizations, a few companies, and people that work for those companies. And it's something that needs to be addressed. And, given the pandemic, this is even prior to the pandemic, they had remote work opportunities being available, but to certain organizations and certain people. So in disaster and recovery, they have these remote work opportunities to support communities. So for me, this is something not new, but I feel like the pandemic kind of expedited it further.
Yeah, it exacerbated it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, Liz, as you kind of alluded to, we're talking about outcomes, right? These are, and Aaliyah, you've alluded to this as well. We're talking about predetermined outcomes based on where you live, right? Where you grew up, and how are you trying to, manage and navigate those systems, right? We already have, predetermined systems through, years and years and generations after generations of systems of how they've been built in, and the inequities have been built in. So now it's like, now we have this digital space where it's like, the inequities are even more prevalent. So then, what do we do from here? That's the big question, is where do we have these discussions? And if we have political leaders that are saying everyone needs to get back to work because that's where the congregation is, she's missing the point. So it's like, what do we do from here? And your roles as economic developers, what do you do to kind of say, we want to bring more equity, we want to level the playing field? Like, what have you done, or what are you looking to do to do that? And the floor is yours. Like, what's going on?
I think the important thing in response to your question is to really try to make sure that you're bringing in people that have had diverse experiences, right? This is why diversity is important in all levels, right? So if at a management team, at a management level, if you're able to have a diverse set of voices that have diverse set of experiences, you're able to have those conversations, right? And not just have, be in that box, right? And to make sure that you're doing that, because, for example, if somebody, if I was part of the governor's team, for example, or we were part of the governor's team, be able to say, like, look, like, I think we need to be a little bit more sensitive to these things, or maybe, we phase in and do that. We're still in a pandemic, right? And try to really see exactly, have a stakeholder groups, right? Have kind of talk to folks a little bit more on the ground to see how it's affecting them, because at the end of the day, it's easier to keep people from in the office at home, right? Because, you know, they're in an office, and it's hard to, you know, keep an economy going if, you know, everything else is open, you know, and you send people that are, you know, that are in the front line, but you try to make sure that they're addressing those things front and center, right? And how that's impacting, you know, the message that's being, what's the message, right? That's being delivered, because that's going to be important.
Leah, what's your take on that? I mean, you know, Liz makes some great points here about, you know, what the message is, and their comms team just missing the total point. I mean, this is, you know, it flies in the face of what we're trying to accomplish in this new economy, if you will. So, you know, what's on the ground at where you're working, and what's the message that you're hearing from businesses who want to come to the Toronto area or the GTA?
Yeah, so I feel like it's different for every organization, or
Yeah,
especially the companies that
absolutely.
come in. Some are more, you know, open to adopting the diversity, equity, and inclusion part. And then some are, let's say, back in the 70s and stuck in those eras, not to say anything rude, but, you know, where
Oh,
they
it's not stuck. I mean,
just
that's
function
even the
that way.
governor. Yeah. I mean,
You know, their
yeah.
CEO is from a certain background, and then that's how their organization's built up. And that's where I feel like there's an issue where you will face challenges, even in organizations or communities where, you know, you're trying to be more open and inviting now for, let's say, immigrants or for other communities or other businesses. You have to create that environment first. So either it's going to be changes in your policy, changes in your organization, and kind of remarket yourself or rebrand yourself as a place that's open. You could probably be open, but I feel like based on your website, you know, when the people go to your website with the information that's there, that's the information they get. And I feel like with the pandemic, companies not being able to actually visit Toronto or visit Canada, they kind of miss out those opportunities. So that's where your website and being online presence and tweeting information or even posting information that talks about the different demographics that you have and the companies you've supported and their success stories. So I feel like it's more so storytelling and how you present your community is the way that you can move forward that agenda of DEI. I don't think there's a one size fit all solution to this. And I feel like every community has a different demographics that they're geared towards because their, you know, their population makeup is maybe, you know, majority Asian population. So they have to address those needs. It's not like they're closed off to other, you know, communities or, you know, groups. It's just that, you know, that's the majority and they have to work with what they have. And that's similar to companies too. You have to work with the industries you have and provide that support. But that's where the diversity part comes in, where how do you diversify an industry? That's where supply chain comes in. That's the conversation that we're trying to put forward as an FDI agency, where it's like, you know, we're bringing in these companies from different regions, but there's also this aspect of that we can diversify it too by, you know, providing them the resources and figuring out where down the road in their supply chain, what is missing and trying to figure out those gaps.
One of the things in the conversations that we've been having, I think, I mean, in LA County, I think in general, but also in Culver City. And Culver City, for folks that don't know, is a small 5, you know, square mile city, smack down in the middle of LA, city of LA. We're east of city Santa Monica and north of Los Angeles International Airport. And it really is home, you know, it was home to MGM, which is now Sony Pictures, and the Culver Studios, which is a historic studio. It is where the whatchamacallit, Gone with the Wind was filmed. But as we know, in, you know, a lot of, you know, now media, tech, and entertainment companies, a lot of that is now content driven, right? A lot of that is technology driven. And within those industries, we don't see a lot of diversity, right? So a lot of the conversations really have been within workforce development. And, and if we really want to look at, our communities that are around us, right, and the industries that we have, and it's seen how can we expose, some of the kids, for example, for us, obviously, LA is a very, very diverse place. And how do we, but our industries, especially at a certain level, for media, tech, entertainment, biotech, STEM, all of the different industries that we have here in LA, they're not reflective of, our general population, right? There's different reasons because of that, but a lot of reasons is because, we still have stark inequities, right? We still have a lot of issues that we have to deal with, and we have a lot of communities that are still isolated. Now, there's a lot of initiatives over the last, 10, 15 years, and, Andre could probably say, like, when him and I were in LA, that those conversations were really starting to kind of combine kind of the synergies between this, but, and I know now those conversations are even better, but to think about workforce development as a cradle to scale, right? Which is, you start talking about STEM, you start talking about technologies at a very young age, at elementary. I have 2 young kids in elementary school, in kindergarten and 3rd grade. They love robotics, they love all these different, they love engineering, but it's something that has been instilled with them since the beginning, right? Since they were babies. We love building, we love doing all these like basic Legos, blocks, talking, reading, we read, things like that. So those are fundamentals that, in communities, working communities of color. When I grew up, my parents were just trying to work and survive, right? My parents are immigrants, Mexican immigrants. They're just trying to survive. And for working class families, that's a real thing, right? And so for kids, being able to be, the education and school is the only place to be able to do that, right? So the only way that we're going to talk about equity is to obviously lift communities, and especially communities that have been historically disenfranchised, right? Our most vulnerable communities. So I and really expose children to those type of things, because, and connect obviously to our industries, to make sure that there's some kind of pipeline to really expose them to the issues, to the industries, to the work, that this is obviously, this is a job, right? This is something that people actually do, that you can do it too, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that comes into play with economic developers, when sometimes we focus on obviously the economic development of it, the construction, the bringing the jobs, but we miss the opportunity to really work with workforce development and create that synergy to be, when we're talking about equity, right? In a place where, like LA, like San Francisco, where people are being priced out, and so how do we create those things so the folks that historically have lived in certain areas are able to connect with the actual jobs, right? To get them out of poverty, to get them into things that will advance, to have financial literacy, to do all, the gambit of all these different things, right? So, yeah, there's my rant.
Well, it's not necessarily a rant. I mean, there's truth behind it, right? I mean, we've talked about things like, people's lived experiences, access, not only access to market, but people, having the accessibility, the resources, the connection to workforce development. There's a whole bunch of factors here that need to be involved.
It's all connected, and it's very, and
Yeah.
it's important for economic developers.
Yeah.
And I think, government, I've worked in government for almost 15 years. it's important for all of us to really think about this interconnectedly, right? And sometimes, and you know, we see it in silos.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get into our silo because there's so much things to think of, right? It's easy to not engage certain like stakeholders because it's the hard thing to do.
Yeah. And I
right?
think that's
It's
what
going to
it
take
is.
later.
Yeah, and it's going to take the hard work of people to create those synergies, not only within planning or not only within economic development, but within the structures that exist. And I mean, Aaliyah, you see it on the ground, you see the differences, you see it from, from the different
Yeah.
partners that you're seeing, right? And Aaliyah, like, I think we've talked about this, even within the profession itself, there's this disconnect between who the people are within boards of directors and what's
Absolutely.
happening on the ground, right? So it's like, what are we doing here? Like, so Aaliyah, like, I mean, give us some examples of what you've been faced with.
Yeah, so just bouncing off of, Elizabeth and education, right? So I feel like the first project that I had dived in for economic development was university development here for province of Ontario. So at that time, it was a conversation between City of Markham in Ontario with York University, which is the university I was studying at. And the relationship there was that there was a proposal by the province that, we're going to expand post-secondary institutions. And we're interested in looking at municipalities that don't have a university campus that would want to get a university campus. So it became like the mailbox. Like if your community had a mailbox, a post office, you're a hit. You're going to get the jobs, you're going to get the talent. So now it kind of shifted towards if you don't have a university campus or a college, you are not, have the talent or have the attraction for the companies to come to your community. So there's we have like close to 21 different universities here in Ontario, public and private. And I think the one private one that we had was the French University, but I guess it's no longer existent. But, in conversation of the university development, the municipalities that were competing for this were 29. And, there's only 3 universities that were a part of the conversation at the time, which was Wilfrid Laurier, that already had a really strong relationship with town of Milton. Then there was, City of Brampton, who is also a neighboring city to Mississauga and Toronto that's quite large, has the diverse population, has a good young population that's, foreign born, but also has that, capability of becoming a good community to house a university. They were part of the conversation. And then obviously the City of Markham, which is the tech hub for, it's considered a tech hub for Ontario, based on the sign that when you pass on the highway. So the conversation there was, it's the city planner's job to bring in the universities. And that's where the conversation kind of flipped, where I said, there has to be someone that's marketing the cities. There has to be the one that represents the community itself and trying to say that it's the quality of life here that, and the demographics and the fact that we have good quality jobs. Who are those people? A lot of investigation, turns out it's the mayor and then the economic developer that came to me. So I was like, interesting. So through my studies, I learned about geography and, urban studies. So urban was like more so urban planners. So the conversation was like, oh, it's the city planners are always in the front center. Turns out, no, in the conversation, it's always the economic developers making the first bid. And then it goes down to the city planners where it's like, okay, can you tell us a feasible site? And do you think this would be a good fit for our community? So there's this huge different silos where these departments are working in, where there's the Department of Economic Development, then there's the Department of City Planning or Urban Planning, and then there's the other Department of Disaster Emergency Management. And that's where I'm going to tell you where the link comes in with that third department that I discovered. So, from lo and behold, those municipalities, Markham, Milton, and Brampton were successful in getting those university campuses up and going, despite the political issues that they had in terms of, getting the funding, getting approval and whatnot. But it goes to show that, municipalities or communities feel that if I don't have a university campus, I don't think I'll get those jobs. And I don't think I will create those opportunities for my residents or my locals. And that's the issue here where it comes to businesses as well. You may get the business, But the thing is, you're attracting talent or, you know, jobs elsewhere. So that's where I feel like the geography plays, like those students are probably not all from Brampton. They're probably coming up from other communities. And that's the issue with the neighboring municipality, where it's like, you're going to be taking my students, or you're going to be taking the students that were going to, let's say, trekking up north to, you know, towards Vaughan, you know, to come to, but now they're going to go to either Vaughan or they're going to come towards, you know, Brampton, because that's where the university is now. It's closer to them. So there's going to be this issue. But how do you retain that talent in that community is the challenge I feel like all our communities are having. And then I saw another conversation where there were certain municipalities that were willing to close their branch campuses, where the university is like, you know, we're going to pull out from this community. And that's where I had the conversation where I was like, you know, you're pulling out from this university. You made a commitment to this town. You're saying we're going to bring you these jobs. All of a sudden now, because there's a larger urban municipality in the play, you're saying, let's close your satellite campus and let's move elsewhere. I felt that it kind of left them in this, you know, hopelessness, where what do we do with our talent that we created so much? What happens to those degrees? What happens to those jobs for those students? And
yeah. And actually to put into context, you know, for Brampton, for instance, they were ready to do a joint campus, what was it, Sheridan College and Ryerson. And then the provincial government pulled the plug once they were elected, saying there was no money for that. But then they kind of redid some smaller idea of having that campus. And I remember there was a whole discussion around, you know, having this satellite campus in a growing community in Brampton. And Brampton is a community just northwest of Toronto, within the Greater Toronto Area, where it's got a high concentration of South Asian population. So, you know, and they're more focused on the medical profession or the arts and whatnot. So that's where they wanted to and I think that the major thing for them was STEM. And then the provincial government pulled it out. And it's like, now you're going to be forced to commute to Toronto or commute to North York or to Markham or to Brantford or Hamilton, right? For those types of things. So it becomes a disconnect. And I understand that, yes, the brick and mortar university campus is kind of falling by the wayside, but they want to bring it back. And, you know, where do we go from here? And it's just like, especially in these types of industries like STEM, where it's predominantly digital, predominantly economic. So, you know, where do we have this conversation of you know, we want to bring education globally and locally as well. So, you know, that's where the whole conversation has has been going. And where do these governments try to see the connect when it comes to this? And I think that's the critical part. And I want to, you know, before we go and because Scott raises a good point here about, you know, our university has reciprocity with Minnesota, so about half the students are not from our community. A built-in legacy hurdle for residents, especially from underrepresented communities, that cannot be easily switched off. And I think that's what the purpose of, and that's the purpose of having these satellite campuses, so that they can save that money, so that they're not burdened by so much debt. I mean, we all know, like, I mean, you know, Aaliyah and I, and Jordan, you know, we're Canadians, so we universities are heavily subsidized, whereas, and our tuitions aren't as expensive. But at the same time, when you have the US, it's a totally different story. There's, you know, Liz is just like, you know, you're burdened by so much debt, and that's because, you know, even the public universities are not even heavily subsidized, and you're drowning in like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of debt, and, you know, private colleges don't even get me started with that. So, you know, so
it's a big. I mean, I agree, Scott. It's a huge. You know, it's like the price of college and the price of higher education in general. The accessibility, it makes it inaccessible for underrepresented students, underrepresented communities in general. So it makes it something that is foreign, right? It makes it something that continues to be that I can attain, because it's just so it's difficult to really get into that, because especially for a lot of underrepresented students, like, how am I going to pay that? Right. And I had a hard time when I was getting into college. I was a first generation college student, when I was like, how am I going to pay this? How am I going to have 40, 50, $60,000 in debt? That just blew my mind until somebody sat me down and said, you just need to do it. You'll be okay. But it was so difficult to just do that but I had somebody, right? I had people along my way guiding me to do that. That's not always the case.
Scott, go ahead and talk.
Andre unmuted me. This is a little frightening, but thank you.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, hello. This is wonderful. I'm sorry we can't grab a lot more people in here, but I think this is it's just going to increase and blossom from here. I can tell for sure. But no, this is great conversation. These are things that we haven't really talked that much about here in Eau Claire. We have one of those for University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, so one of the not unlike the California State University system, very similar with the campuses and such, but with the reciprocity, it really tries to seek groups from outside the area. And you can understand that back early 20th century, mid 20th century, trying to get more students to really build the campus and such. But that's a legacy thing, that half of the students are from somewhere else, and it's just become more of a barrier for
and
our
they
own
leave,
community
right?
members.
They don't stay.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. They come, they get their financially well-priced education, because again, they can get essentially in-state tuition, and then they leave. And we have a running joke, and it's a sad joke, but we talk about a Minneapolis-based Eau Claire graduate, to say, well, we still have these ties to Eau Claire because they got their education here, but they weren't from here, and they're no longer living here. So it's just the old vicious cycle. The plus is our community college system, though, has been really blossoming really well, and they've really amplified what they've been trying to do. They're even seeking to do more in terms of housing and providing housing for students, because that's more kind of the community college concept, and they're trying to seek more with housing. So that's something we're looking at doing too, is trying to help with the housing side of things. So that leads to I have a lot of questions. You shouldn't have unmuted me, Andre, just saying, but.
It's fine, Scott. I know, look, you're a CD director, so you're going to naturally have a lot of questions, right?
And Scott, one of the things that I remember when I was applying for grad schools, I think it was the University of North Carolina. They said, you're underrepresented. You could come here to North Carolina. We'll pay for your entire, graduate degree, but you need to stay here for about 5 years. I think it was North Carolina. Okay. And so it was kind of a way of, the city and the university getting people to stay. So I was like, I think that was, I didn't end up staying. I started walking towards that more than anything. But I thought it was an interesting kind of way of getting new talent, diverse talent, to kind of come and stay, and with the possibility of staying more long term, right? It's kind of like a carrot and a stick type thing.
Well, I think we've seen that through COVID in a positive way here, is that just anecdotally on my very street, my block, there have been residents kind of, I'll say aging out, but retiring and moving away.
Right.
And so selling these little bit larger homes for growing families, and 5 have sold in the last year. Wow. And 4 of the 5 have sold to former California residents who are
Yeah.
leaving the state because
Yeah.
of various reasons. But so we have kind of the housing, let's say affordability. We're going to bump up into that ceiling pretty quickly, but that I think has been helpful in keeping people here more than we had in the past, and just the amenities that we do have available. So a question I have, kind of a bigger, broader question, if I could. So we're working on a new EDI strategic plan here at the city. Just hired earlier in the year, the very first EDI coordinator, which is exciting.
Congratulations.
And so, yes, thanks. I had nothing to do with it, but I'm thankful for it, and I'm so glad that she's here and she's working on this new strategic plan. And so one of the things that we're kind of talking about now is, and I'm hoping you have some good insights in this, is kind of the measurable goals. What are some measurable kind of achievements, so to speak, that we can really aim for, that really shows that there's progress in these areas from that local government perspective? I mean, we can talk about, my silo, as it were, is really focused on the affordable housing and trying to, address a lot of the housing insecurities in the community, struggling with homelessness and things of that sort. So that's kind of my focal point. But what are the broader, is it kind of things, but kind of like actual measurable goals that we should be striving towards in that EDI concept?
Go ahead, Ali.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I feel like in terms of measurable, number one, I feel like it has to look at your businesses in your community. Who are the ones that use your services in your community? And then getting more so like creating a community profile. So getting a good strong sense of not only your, people that use your resources within your community, but outside of your community as well. In terms of understanding the different businesses that are there. So for us, it was like more so mapping out, our different municipal partners, but also mapping out, the different trade commission officers, and then also managing our, board of trades that every municipality has here, and then looking at their businesses that come out to them. So that's when we found out that there's different associations. So, and they all have their different needs. So I feel like in order to understand your community better, that's one way to measure it. Other things in terms of what type of resources do they require when they first, like setting up a concierge service, especially during the pandemic, just getting a sense of what resources they need and couldn't find at the time. And if there was any opportunities for funding or support that you provided and which ones they use the most. That's some suggestions, and feel free to jump in if you have any other.
I'm gonna read. So Cynthia, she's from LA as well, and she posted a link to LA County, and LA County has an anti-racist policy agenda, and so she posted that just for folks to kind of read and to look at, just how the county as a whole. I mean, LA County is as big as several states put together.
Just before anything, yeah. So
sorry, I was trying to confirm. I have my he says he's my Vanna White. We have 10 million people in LA County alone. So you could imagine that implementing some of these things is really, it's difficult, but being able to have great leaders in place is so important, to be able to recognize what is needed in terms of actionable steps to implement at various levels within the organization, internally and externally, and then looking out externally. So Cynthia, thank you so much for posting that, because I feel like when we're talking about these issues, it's so important to not reinvent the wheel and trying to push it forward, right? There's so many communities out there that are doing amazing work. So we're, trying to share, people sometimes are surprised when I reach out to other cities, just to get a sense of what people are doing. Because they said, well, this is typically not done. I said, why not? We do very similar work. Let's learn from each other, and let's, adapt it to our community. That's how innovation happens, right? You adapt it to your community. Communities are changing, right? And we're trying to push this agenda and these agendas forward, So thank you so much for posting that. And, anybody else that has any thoughts of what you've been doing, any work that you've been doing that you'd like to share, please post that. I know that our city's been in this, let me look for it, and then I'll kind of jump in. But anybody else like to have any questions?
Well, Cynthia's got a comment. She's chiming in. So go ahead, Cynthia.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Aaliyah, Andre. You're welcome. I'm very much of the same mindset. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of great efforts that are taking place, as you mentioned. As part of the workforce development department, our structure in LA County with the workforce is really interesting because we have aging services with workforce. And so right now we're in a process of kind of like breaking those two apart. So they're going to be two standalone departments. But in the midst of all of this, we're actually establishing our own equity committee in process, which is part of this mandate that comes from LA County and the Board of Supervisors and the RD initiative. So our department has started to take steps in trying to look at our agency and figuring out what is it that we can do to better support an anti-racism and an equitable agenda for the department. And so with that, it's been really interesting. One of the things that we've done is really bring engagement from all levels of the organization. And we've actually decided that we want our staff, whether you're a manager or whatever level of the organization you're at, to volunteer and to actually be part of this process. So we actually have staff that is co-leading, and then we have like an administrator, and we're having these very difficult and very emotional conversations to try and explore and to look at what is it that we can do, how can we improve, and so forth. But when it comes to any implementation of any new program or initiative, I mean, this is a difficult subject, and this is a very difficult process for organizations to undergo. So you need to have a champion, you need to have somebody that supports 100% the efforts, and that keeps it in the light and in everybody's viewpoint throughout. And of course, go ahead, Elizabeth.
No, I would say absolutely, like somebody that's a champion, because these are very difficult conversations. It makes people really uncomfortable, and so being able to kind of put it forward and have a champion is so important, to be able to kind of have those honest conversations where you're engaging folks, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so like, one of the things, we're talking about partnerships. We're talking about who's going to be the champion. I know, so Keith is here. He's from Chicago. He doesn't work for the city of Chicago. He works for a consulting firm and in Chicago. And I know that they're doing stuff on the transit side when it comes to, they call ETOD, Equity Transit Oriented Development. And I know Banuja mentioned something about their equity initiatives at LA Metro. And of course, right. So there's the transit component to the economic development side of things. So, Aaliyah, is there anything you want to add to this conversation before we move on and close this?
Yeah, and just in terms of champions or just people part of the conversation, I think you have to be open-minded when those conversations happen.
Absolutely.
A lot of people, I feel like if people are more openly telling you what's wrong, it's better, because that means they feel comfortable and they trust you enough to tell you exactly what's going wrong, rather than just having people saying, yes, yes, I agree with you. Because I feel like in these conversations, I rather listen to people that disagree with me and have opinions and thoughts to bring to the table, because that's how I can, better improve myself in the organization, right? I wouldn't want to have everyone agreeing with me at the table, because then that just shows that they're not they don't feel comfortable to share their experiences with me. So that's something I just wanted to mention.
Yeah, and that's, and as Scott said, measuring success in this space is going to be the next scary thing, right? It's just a lot of people, especially, look, outside of the Chicagos, the Torontos, the LAs, and the Seattles who are following this Race Forward initiative through Policy Link and whatnot, they are, there's a lot of these smaller municipalities who are either resistant to change, or they're just getting on board. And I'm starting to see that, at least within, Southern Ontario, we're starting to see some mid-sized cities starting to have these conversations about, how do we bring equity into our to change our systems.
Yeah,
right?
and just so folks, so I know there's been a couple of links posted on the chat. The one that I posted is the one that our city's part of, the Local and Regional Government Alliance for Race and Equity. There's actually a racial equity toolkit, and it has tools to operationalize equity within internally. So these, it's important, because it has to be institutionalized, otherwise things don't change. It has to be within our policies, our programs, our budgets, in different aspects of it, to be able to change cultures. The culture shift.
Exactly. The culture shift is important, especially governments. We all know governments are averse to change and sometimes even slow to change, right? Very slow to change, as opposed to a nonprofit sector and even the private sector, right? And that's the critical part here. It's just, how is it that they can put the resources to this and have the initiative to do this, whether it's in planning, economic development, housing, whatever it is. Yeah, they're siloed, but they still align one way or another within a city. And and that's the part that we need to figure out.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes, as we're talking about, as we mentioned here, we were talking about innovation. We were talking about partnerships. So how do we get those partnerships to finally come on board and say, yeah, look, we're doing this and we've proven this. We have the measures to do this. And we're starting to see that change, although it's going to take another 2, 3, 4 years for that to actually materialize. How does government finally decide to say, okay, let's have initiative to move forward and say, because we are at the local level, we are the ones who are the closest to people. We are the ones who need to drive that change and be examples, right? And that's what it is, right? So how do we move towards that? And how do economic developers play a role in building those partnerships between government, private sector, and the nonprofit sector?
Yeah.
So anyone want to chime in? Cynthia's got her mic unmuted. Aaliyah, Liz,
Keith.
Go ahead. And yeah, Keith wants to say, oh boy, Keith wants to talk. All right. Keith, go ahead, man.
Hi, everyone. I will say that while I'm in the private sector now, I'm a consultant. I have worked on both sides of the fence. I've worked in government extensively, and also most extensively recently, like in the private sector as a consultant. And I will say that in my experience working on whether it's like ETOD projects or working on development, because I've worked in commercial real estate financing in those areas and development, sometimes it's like I feel like sometimes, like with government bodies, at times the understanding that there is a profit motive on our side, and being comfortable with that, with the fact that we need to make money, and that it's a joke that some buddies and I who are still on the other side of the fence have said, which is that money is real on our side, and it's real on both sides. But when we're looking at projects from like the private sector, when I was in development or some of the other work that I do now, we are very, very much so responsible for the bottom line. If something
Right.
goes wrong on our end, I may have to lose people.
Yeah.
I may have to cut people. And understanding
Yeah.
and being comfortable with the fact that, someone with some of these projects is going to make money because we have to. And
Right.
I know I've worked on innovative financing projects in the past where that was kind of like, well, they're making money. They're making a lot of money. And it's like, yes, because
Because
I have
that's
to.
the goal.
Yeah.
And even if we want to do good, it's still like I have to. Otherwise, I can't keep the lights on.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what it is. And no, what we agree, I agree with you, Keith. And,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a big challenge as we move forward in terms of how do we develop our cities? How do we bring business to our cities, to our counties, to our provinces and states, and to our countries? So it's a multi-level discussion that needs to be had. And also at the same time is how do we close those gaps in terms of building those relationships, as well as the people that we're trying to attract
Yeah.
into those industries.
And Andre, one of the things I feel like, kind of to Keith's point is that, it's like now that, over the last couple of years that I've been working in Culver City, I've been working more on construction, on, kind of project management in that sense. So I've been learning a lot about, as you said, that bottom line, right? For construction projects, for things like that. And it's really really helped me understand, it's like when you said understand stakeholders, understand that, and that businesses obviously need to they have that bottom line where they need to pay for the services, they need to pay for certain things, right? So how do we balance all of those different things, right? Obviously government has a different role, right, in the private sector, and understanding our roles, but it's also understanding what the private sector needs to be, it's like what they need to do to function, right? And understanding the finances. And sometimes in government, we don't understand that as much, unless we are either have worked in it before, or we're explicitly working with them, just like I have in the last couple of years. But I would always be, why, you guys are the private sector, just do X, Y, and Z, and it was a very naive way of thinking about things.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And that's what it is, right? Keith, is there anything else you wanted to say, or we can close it?
Just one more quick point, because I know we're over on time, but exactly what you're saying, because I started in the private sector and then moved into the public sector, and then now consult specifically to the public sector. And I will say that coming from the private sector, I didn't even completely understand that the different motives were not even just clearly defined for the public sector until I got to that side. And being on that side of things, I saw how I approached, whether it was RFPs, whether it was working with the consultants that we were using, developers, whomever, differently than some of my colleagues when I was in government, just because of my experience. And I kind of went like, hey, well, that's out of scope. Or, they didn't bid that. We can't ask them to do that because someone in that office is going to be held accountable because we pushed this. And I've been that person and it's not fun. So no, I think that just a better understanding in that conversation, to your point, Elizabeth, around really getting a stronger understanding of each other and how that balance needs to occur. And I'm done.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Keith. It was, I know you jumped in late, but at the same time, your contribution is amazing. And, I've known you for a few years, and you've done a lot of great work, and thank you for that. So I want to close off by, saying thank you. I know Aaliyah had to jump off the call, but, like I said, Liz and I have been coworkers, friends for so long, and I really thank her for joining in and agreeing to this. And her, Liz's contribution has been amazing, and I really appreciate that. I
We've
thank
known
you.
each other for 18 years.
Oh my God, is it 18 years? Oh geez.
I'm not dating myself whatsoever.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and yeah, exactly. I'm not dating myself either, but yeah, 18 years. Wow. That's a long time. I know. And time flies when you have fun. Yeah.
Thank you,
Look at her.
Cynthia.
Oh my gosh. So yeah. So thank you everybody for joining in. I really appreciate the conversation. And I wish I knew everything about this Zoom part and understand, like when Liz had said, is there any way to have people have the conversation? It's like, now that I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do it. So now I'm learning as I go how I go with these webinars. And it was great to have this fluid conversation. And I want to thank everyone. Liz put her contact information in the chat box already.
Yeah.
So feel free to connect with her on LinkedIn. And everyone knows who I am on social media. So thank you very much. And have yourselves a great day. And everyone in the US, have yourself a great Thanksgiving.
Bye, everybody.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you.
Take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you for coming.
Bye.